welcome to another episode of Arcpoint Sessions. This is Rizwan Jagani, a very long time friend of mine by this point, and wanted to invite him on. Welcome.
Hey Jacob, thanks for having me. Glad to be here.
Yeah. So maybe we just start and maybe you can share a little bit about yourself and your background. We'll get more into it, but do you want to give like a synopsis?
Absolutely. I've been playing viola for a very, very long time, more than I can imagine. But one cool thing about me is that I've always been a violist. Like I started on viola, and that's the instrument I continued on. And I did it through like middle school, high school, and then even in undergrad when I was originally poised to do pre-med. And then pre-med didn't work out for me, so I switched to engineering, which is the next best thing for South Asians. And then I had a reckoning with vector calculus, and I then decided to go music full force. I finished with a music major, Spanish minor, then took 2 years off, and then master's artist diploma, and I just finished my doctorate back in May, and here's where I'm at right now.
There you go. Yeah, and where you're at right now, I know you've been really busy. You want to talk about what you've been doing this summer?
Oh my gosh. Sure. So this summer alone, I had like the season finale for Fairfax Symphony. I played in that orchestra as a orchestra fellow, which is like a program. It's like a diversity fellowship for underrepresented demographics in symphonies. And yeah, there are not that many South Asians, so I was like, let me use that. And so I did the season finale for that. Then, literally like a day later, I did the International Pride Orchestra, so we had rehearsals for that and then concert the same week. Um, been doing some freelance work. I do a lot of event entertainment,
Hmm.
and now I'm getting ready for a conference in Baton Rouge, Louisiana, with Delta Omicron International Music Fraternity. Then after that, I'm going up to Maine to do a cabaret performance. Then I fly back here to do a wedding. And then at the end of July, I go off to Austria where I perform with the Classical Music Festival of Eisenstadt, Austria. And this year I'm sitting principal viola it's my third time sitting principal. And we're doing Beethoven 9 and a bunch of other incredible pieces.
Yeah. And if you've been following him on Instagram, you'll see the practice he's been putting through with all of that. Yeah. Well, congrats on all of that busy stuff. I know it's burdensome, but also it's what we do it is for fun, right? It's a great
We
time.
do it because we love it. Yes, it's like it's not a curse, it's a challenge sometimes.
Yeah.
I was told once, and I mean, the biggest blessing is we get to do this.
Hmm.
And I think, I'm at the era in my life now where I'm trying to figure out what it means to do this, not being a student in school, but being a student of the world.
Exactly.
Yeah, so you're constantly learning, but a lot of what you do now is kind of held to a higher regard because you're not in school now.
Hmm.
So you really
Yeah.
want to make sure that you're putting your best, notes forward, if you will.
Yeah. And I think just to contribute to that statement too, in times like these, are reminded the persistence of the importance of art, right? That's a really consistent thing in our lives. It's easy to think that we're doing stuff that's really silly by, oh, we're just playing music, right? But go back to all the times of turmoil.
I
A lot
believe
of
it's like I believe it's like a Victor Hugo quote where it's like when words fail, mu art speaks or music speaks.
Mhm.
So it is true. Like you can put a lot into a piece that you may not necessarily be able to articulate into a sentence, or maybe specific causes that might be important to someone are sometimes better expressed through an artistic medium and not just, a verbal medium.
Absolutely. Yeah. Well, maybe on that wonderful note of grim social stance currently, maybe let's backtrack and talk a little bit about how we met, actually, because I think this is important for people to know. You don't have to know somebody through mutuals at first, actually, in the music world.
Yeah.
What is your recollection of what happened?
Just one of the many Instagram violas that seem to come across my radar, but
Mhm.
I think but like we both have the Texas connection. And for me, I think that just always adds another layer. I can't remember when we got in touch, Must it was definitely pre-COVID.
Yeah, a little
I
bit before COVID.
Pre-COVID, and you were at TCU
Hmm.
studying with Dr. Misha Galaganov. And I believe it was around the time that my teacher was taking his spot while he was on sabbatical for a semester.
Yes.
So around, I think, believe it was like 2018, 2019 is when
Yeah,
we got in
somewhere
touch.
around there.
And it's, I've always just enjoyed following your journey. You've always had very thought-provoking content. And, watching your meteoric rise in your own artistry has just always been really cool. And then I later on found out when I was doing Generation String Quartet at Austin College during the pandemic that one of our violinists, you grew up with him.
Hmm.
So it's just like, and I guess it just further emphasizes how the interconnected the music world is, but also especially if you're from Texas. It's like almost
It's crazy.
everyone from Texas knows each other, and it's bonkers to think about that. But I think that just makes it extra special. And then you were here on the East Coast for some time,
Hmm.
and now you're going back more towards the Midwest.
Yeah, it's interesting too because we realize that even more so that the Texas Connect is a thing because we're both in the Northeast now, and that still persists.
Absolutely.
But let's break into that a little bit more. We connected a bit over Instagram because of that mutual teacher connection, but we also met because of like this 3D printed mute company that kind of made our talking point more more present, right? You remember
I
anything
think
like that?
so, yeah. I have not even thought about that.
Yeah, I remember because I was working with I think the company is pronounced VOE. So I've always only typed it but never said it.
Yeah.
And helped them design a mute and stuff like that. You reached out and you were like, "How did you do this?" Or like, uh, what brought you to connect with them? And I was telling you about cold emailing and everything, and you were like, "You're too young to be thinking about cold email." You didn't say that,
Oh
but
my
we
gosh.
talked about the business side right off the cuff, and I think that's when we really started to click on this brand of networking, right? That's
Yeah.
what we both knew we like networking. Um, Maybe you want to talk about what you do with your networking side because I know you've gone through
It's
this change
very
of identity, right?
it's very interesting you talk about this because, it's not exactly something that is talked about a lot in educational settings
Absolutely.
as much as it needs to be because even if you're auditioning for orchestras, you still have to maybe email a personnel manager. You still maybe have to reach out to somebody who's going to read, what you have to say.
Hmm.
Even if you're just inquiring basic information that's available on a website, maybe you just need some direction to get there.
Right.
Um, my whole stance on networking, I think it has finally kind of taken shape in a way where I can kind of articulate it into words. Is that for me, networking is based on a personal connection. It's not based on a professional connection. And the reason being is that you're already talking to each other as professionals. Like that's a given. You're already in the same room.
Hmm.
It's more like what allows you to go into the next room or like the whole idea of getting your foot in the door. Your foot in the door is already knowing the fact that you're talking to somebody who is in the same business, in the same line of work. Fine. But what gets you in the room? Do you guys connect? Because just because you both play viola or you both have the same vision, if personalities don't click, then it's I think it's very, very difficult for, good art to flourish, good work to flourish. Because there has to be like I last September I was out in San Francisco and I worked with this artist there and their company and we connected on the internet and everything seemed very hunky-dory, but when I got there the energies were just so strange and I'm no longer in touch with this individual.
Hmm.
And just because we both had incredible artistic visions, sometimes just the way people's vibes are, it doesn't always work. And
Yeah.
that's taken me a long time to accept
Hmm.
because I normally have a pretty good track record. But at the same time, like, it is important to think about, how you personally connect with somebody. What are their ethics? What are their belief systems? And what is something that excites them? What is makes them passionate? Because if that similar thing resonates with you, then the rest falls into place quite easily.
Hmm.
Like you can have a shared vision, but if If the vibes are off, if the energy is off, or if you guys have different work ethics that don't seem to gel together, then it's not worth it. But I think you and I have both discovered that in our own ways. And for you to discover where you're at right now much earlier than where I mean, like I always knew I could do it, but it was more like putting it into like, I guess like a formula. I feel like you had that formula down pretty quickly, which is very, very impressive.
Maybe we'll talk a little bit about that too, because I was kind of gonna segue into this because I think what you're leading towards is being authentic, like trusting your gut um with people's intentions as well,
Yes.
but also just being your true self, right? So I think that identity, I, I've I've watched you too, and I've seen this um crystallization of who your identity truly is,
Thank you.
and you've finally come to this point where you're like, nope, unapologetically, I this is Rizwan, right? And I think that's such an important thing when you're putting yourself out there and networking, right? Maybe you want to talk about a little bit of your background where um you've come to be confident in your place, if that makes sense as a question.
Yeah. No,
Yeah.
that's been a journey. It
Yeah.
has been a journey. I will say being in the world of music and art definitely makes that journey easier
Hmm.
because you may find somebody who is in that place and that inspires you. And sometimes they become your friend too along the way.
Hmm.
Um, the hardest thing for me has been balancing sort of, I live in America, but I'm South Asian. South
Hmm.
Asian culture has its own codes and rules and ethics and approaches for things. And, it's finding that balance between, the people I interact with on a daily basis and the people that I come home to. For example, right now I live with my parents and, I'm around my family a lot. And a lot of them have very different perspectives on, how you showcase yourself in a public image, as opposed to, what it is in the Western world.
Hmm.
Um, and I've been trying to find that balance. I'm still working on it, but I definitely feel very at ease when I'm out and about now. Like, I don't feel like I have to, put on a show. Like, in classical music, it's very interesting. The decorum is a lot more serious. And that seriousness does carry into who we are because of the work we do when we bring it to other situations, just because of the work ethic, the way we
Hmm.
conduct ourselves. But I think at the same time, it's like with the right people, you can kind of let your hair down and enjoy and, be expressive in different ways. And I think, being confident in that is important, but also not needing to be hard on yourself all the time. Like I used to think that, if you're not welcomed 100% authentically, like full force expressive in a space, the space is not for you. But it could also be that the space is very much for you. It just requires a different approach.
Hmm.
And that's not a disservice on you as the individual. That's just the circumstance of the situation.
Right.
And understanding that and knowing that is important. And that's still being authentic because then you control the situation.
Hmm. That's a very wise way of putting things, I think. Yeah.
It's taken
Awesome.
me a long time to understand that. And
And
I never had good examples of that in front of me. So
mhm.
now I do. And it's a lot easier now.
And I think that goes back to what you said at the very beginning, right? We're still in this point of our lives where we're learning in the real world, just not in school, right?
Yeah.
I think that's the best way to be is you're still exploring, you're still finding out who you are, no matter what position in life. If you stop learning, good luck.
Well, you
You know,
stop learning, you deteriorate.
yeah.
Like
Hmm.
late stage mental health cognitive decline happens because people stop learning.
Yeah.
Like that's why, we have their, I mean, that's why so many of the great violists lived into their later parts of their lives, is because
Hmm.
they were still practicing. They were still putting in the work.
Yeah. It takes a little bit of an obsession, I think.
Definitely.
That's how I've always liked to put it with my students, and they look at me like I'm crazy, but I'm like, I kind of am.
Yeah.
Um, maybe let's talk a little bit about what you do outside, because we say violist, and all of that sort of thing. And we have this stereotype, you're playing Beethoven and Bach all the time. Well, you are not, right? Talk about your work with arranging and your influences there.
So when I was an undergrad, my theory teacher, we used to do for my ear training, we used to listen to Bollywood music and then transcribe it from
Hmm.
like a rhythmic harmonic standpoint. And from that kind of became my love for arranging. I'd already been playing Bollywood stuff and like, doing some non-classical because it was the best way for me to connect with my family. While my family is very musical, maybe like two or three of my relatives actually do listen to classical music.
Hmm.
My aunt in Pakistan, actually, my mom's younger sister, her favorite piece of work is La Traviata. But, I can't say the same for like, my maternal grandmother. So, like, I have to learn I play different things for her. And now I'm at an era where like I'm playing even more things that she's familiar with.
Right.
But I got into arranging in undergrad and then I applied my brain to like maybe other pieces that were by other instruments. Like, how can I play this on viola? And then it segued into this desire of wanting to sort of use the viola as a vehicle to learn popular music, as I was also learning classical music, because popular music also presents its own challenges and difficulties just as much as it is a connecting force for, a diverse audience.
Hmm.
And then I was always into orchestration. I always wanted to learn how to write, um, arrangements and do all these incredible things. And that is definitely something that I'm doing still. It's been a while since I've orchestrated something, so I need to get back into that just for the sake of, having stuff to do. It's just like I still feel like I'm recovering from school and now I'm still like going full force, doing all this stuff with orchestra.
Hmm.
But it's just an interest I always had. And then recently I've had really good examples in front of me. One of my favorite artists in London, they're a husband-wife duo. The wife is like the principal vocalist, and the husband is the composer and orchestrator. And it's some of the best modern orchestrations I've ever heard. It's Abhi Sampa and Rushil Ranjan, and they together formed the Orchestral Kabali project. And having different things to latch onto between my culture and between like Western performance just
Hmm.
keeps this ever-growing interest in me as a violist and as like a classical Western classical musician to have my own voice of doing things. Um, and that's sort of what I want to do. I recently picked up a violin. Don't tell people. I'm still going to be Dr. Rizwan Viola. But I recently met up with a friend of mine, Nick Ravel, who's based in New York, and he's actually written a lot of like technique books for violin, viola, and cello.
Hmm.
And he told me that, if you want to, I do a lot of home recording as he does, as does he. And he mentioned to me that if you're going to do home recording, don't do, eighth, ninth, tenth position on the viola to try and do high stuff. He's like, have a violin,
Hmm.
literally for stuff like that, which kind of broke this armor that I'd always had about being only a violist. And I was just like, you know what? I will bite the bullet. I will get a violin. I will teach violin, potentially double on violin. But it is all interconnected. And at the same time, it's also learning a new skill.
Yeah.
So it's almost like one big feedback infinity thing for me in the sense of, finding other things to do that isn't just, playing Western classical
Hmm.
as much as I love my Western classical.
Yeah. I think that's an important thing too. We're seeing even the I'll break the ice here. Even the pretentious major orchestras are doing pop orchestras more and more prominently. Um, in the recent like decade, I think has been the big surge. And you know, they're selling out concerts, whereas the classical ones aren't as much. So it's a big thing to have that skill. We're seeing a rise in jazz violinists
Yep.
and the skills of like chopping and things like that. So it's really cool.
Wh-
And I think you're one of the only musicians I've seen that has found your niche in like South Asian music, doing Bollywood arrangements, things like that. I think that's a super unique and awesome skill set.
Thank you. I,
So
I made it a point that like I wanted to use my, music school training for this just because it was something that was always brought upon me. Even some of the best musical theater actors, like Kristen Chenoweth, Lea Salonga,
mhm,
they're all Western classically trained. They're all trained in opera, which is why they have some of the healthiest sounding voices even at their age now.
mhm,
Um, and when you mentioned this whole thing about pop versus classical in the orchestra world, it is very true. Like Kennedy Center just had Lindsey Sterling for 2 nights, completely sold out concerts. She was dancing and doing her thing in front of the NSO. I mean, and it's funny because like when I go to the NSO, Beethoven 9 doesn't sell out the concert hall. What sells out the concert hall is like Sarah Bareilles, Anushka Shankar, and it draws out some of the most diverse audiences ever. When you go to a classical concert, not to sound, this is going to sound very uncouth, but
Go
you
for it.
you know what demographic is coming to a classical concert.
Hmm.
They look like you, but maybe like double your age,
Yeah,
double, maybe triple your
probably more than double. Yeah.
Exactly. So like a very specific demographic. Like I mean, I remember going to when I was at Carnegie Mellon for my master's doing going to Pittsburgh Symphony concerts. I went on Friday nights because I could always get discount tickets. It
Hmm.
was literally specific demographic and students of the musicians on stage.
Yeah.
And like, sometimes if you have like an A-list soloist, big fans, super fans of that soloist will come. But if it's, a regular concert where it's like, it's like a symphony and overture situation, it's a very specific demographic. And there is something that needs to be said about, having a more variety, depth in your programming. And maybe not even needing to have it be so separated. I was talking to Maestro Angel Gil Ordóñez, who conducts post-classical ensemble here in DC, and he also conducts Georgetown. He hired me for coaching his students, and I interviewed him for my DMA thesis.
Hmm.
And he actually said that it's almost insulting to audience to have everything being so split apart, because audiences don't need, categories as much as, you need like record stores need them.
Hmm.
But at the same time, it's like, not everybody who wants to listen to, maybe a Broadway actress sing with the orchestra wants to listen to a Beethoven symphony in the same concert.
Right.
But
Right.
maybe there's room for that. Um, you kind of have to think outside the box. I've always been doing on my recitals, I always do an East meets West thing because there are ways of connecting music of now, music of different cultures with what happened in Europe in the 17, 1800s.
Absolutely.
Um,
Yeah.
And I think it's important to have that discussion now more than ever because it's so hard to get into an orchestra.
Hmm. Oh yeah. And this is something that is, I think, more and more becoming prominent in the musical world. I'm working with Dali Quartet for their fellowship, and their big thing, if you don't know, is combining Latin American music with the West. So
Yeah.
every single concert series, they do a Latin American meets West type of event thing.
Yeah.
Or sometimes they have all Latin American music for some concerts, or all Western, but usually it's like they have a unwritten rule of one Latin American piece at least.
Yeah.
And it works because all of that music is, if not before Western tradition, heavily it's music, right? And
Yeah.
I think if you don't write any composer names, most people wouldn't even be able to tell,
Yeah.
you know?
The audiences that are trained in the art form, they know,
Yeah,
but the average person does not.
they'll probably enjoy it more.
I think so too.
Yeah. So I think that's a really cool thing that you do by one, the people you work with, right? You've rather it's if it's intentional or not, you've made a good list of people that do more progressive things in the musical world. Not to
Yeah.
say that that's super progressive. I think it should just be standard. Um,
I think the
Getting
word you
there.
might be looking for is niche.
Sure.
Be-
Yeah.
Because what ends up happening is like these people that I've gotten to meet, maybe chat with, and whose music I listen to, it's very, very like they use the art form in a very specific way, and
Hmm.
then they end up finding like a cult following for it.
Hmm.
Like Abby and Rushel sold out Royal Albert Hall last year,
Right.
and within 24 hours of their tickets being released, they sold out two-thirds of the hall,
Hmm.
which
Hmm.
is impressive.
Oh yeah.
So in that regard, like having, a very refined like lens to look at
Mhm.
that. But I want to hear what you have to say about, what you were trying to go with in that.
Yeah, I mean, even like the organization, the Pride Orchestra, and things of that nature, where they rally in a demographic or have a specific um, theme behind their concert. That type of thing, I think, is it should be more standardized, and I think it's getting there. But it's still seen as like different.
Yes.
And not to say that different is bad. I just want it to be more universal within the classical music world. You know what I mean?
Yeah,
Um,
I
I
feel
think it
like we
should be
shouldn't have
important.
to try so hard.
Yeah, exactly.
And then pretend it's like some new innovative idea. Like, no. It's kind of like how I mean, I'm not trying to sound political, but it's kind of like, when we hear about some new idea proposed here when like another country's been doing it for like decades.
Yeah,
Like I feel like Western classical is in that a lot.
we're behind like
But
very, very many years.
I will say again, it may be a demographic thing specific, I don't know, on, geographical location, but Europe, I feel like does a better job with its forward thinking programming than America does, in some
Yeah.
cases.
Do you think it's because they appreciate art a little bit better?
Definitely. And I think like because I think European audiences are already used to that innovation, they don't mind having something very avant-garde pushed in their faces sometimes
Mhm.
because they often welcome it. You bring that to an American audience, and I notice it maybe not always in classical, but like for example in musical theater, like if you have a director that has a very sort of out there view on something, like the what's the word? I'm trying to think of like a big word here, but like just the diversity of opinions you're gonna get on something because it's and then it always raises that question, do American audiences like things that European audiences like more or vice versa and things like that.
Yeah.
So it's always something that I think about. It's like, I mean, when I go to Europe, I look at how I mean, we're playing Haydn and Beethoven and Mozart, very, very, standard classical music, but I see how people receive it.
Hmm.
Because at the end of the day, you are playing music that is keeping their culture alive.
Yep.
And in North America, particularly until maybe the last 150 years, there was no culture in the music. And I still don't think there is much of one.
No.
So, our culture is kind of an amalgamation of things versus, them having centuries of a culture that is being preserved in this day and age. They don't need to go through like mini renaissances and stuff like that, like as much as I think America does in trying to discover what their identity is.
Yeah, I think that kind of bridges to a point that I am curious your opinion on.
Sure.
Maybe it's kind of this concept of music in the West versus music, or music in North America versus music in Europe type of deal.
Yeah.
Um, so I'm trying to not give you my opinion without. What do you think about the appreciation in North America? Like, why do you think we seem to appreciate it less versus the maybe disregarding the culture side of things? I feel like there's a brand of North American musician versus if you think like soloists from North
Yeah.
America versus soloists in Europe. You know what I'm trying to get at here?
Yeah. I think I don't want to say it's an elitism thing, but if you look at how everything is framed here, it's almost as though everything is a competition.
Hmm.
And especially when it comes to, I mean, like orchestras there get paid less, but they also get like better benefits from where they live.
Hmm.
And so it balances itself out. The orchestra there is almost considered like a community. And you may hear about people like sitting stand partners with each other who hate each other here.
Yeah.
And that just seems to be an accepted rule. I was talking to Matthew Hunter, who's one of the few American violists, one of the few American performers in the Berlin Phil. And he said that when a new musician comes into the orchestra, it kind of becomes a collective responsibility for the rest of the section that they play in or other members of the orchestra to help them sort of acclimatize to the climate and the style and the way that things are done in that group.
Right.
I don't think that necessarily translates here. Even in something like a community orchestra, I was invited to sit principal of an orchestra back in October, and I really liked this conductor, like phenomenal conductor. A friend of mine was the principal second, but the general vibe of the group was something I was not ready for.
Hmm.
And it kind of took away from the goodness that could have been that experience. And, as a result, like I didn't go back to that group. Um, it's a mix of where people view the art, and then you have this layer of egos and energy, unfortunately, in some cases, capitalism, because music is also still a business.
Hmm.
And I think, you hear more about orchestras not doing well here than you do in like Europe. There are obviously exceptions to that rule, but there's always room for art and arts organizations there. I You hear about people trying to start up something, it's like, oh, another arts organization, we already have this. It's like, why not? There can be room for everybody.
Hmm.
Like, why do we need to compete? Like, there's no need to. Like, people will come to what they want to hear. People will come to support who they want to support. Um, and I think also in that it should be important to have a lot of cross-pollination between things. That's what keeps art healthy. It should never be that one person's trying to compete with audiences from this group and versus this group. It really should be like, hey, check out what these people are doing. Oh, check out what these people are doing. Hey, maybe we can work together on something. That doesn't exist here. That doesn't exist here. Or at least it doesn't exist in the way that I would want to see it.
Right.
So,
It's hidden amongst a lot of
a lot of red tape.
yeah. Because I think I'm glad you picked up on what I was getting at because I think I've realized that there's a lot of people that take themselves too seriously in North America or American styled music because we create it as a business.
Yes.
You hit the nail on the head when you said we don't appreciate the culture as much. We look at it as a job. When we join, I'm gonna lay it out there because screw it. When we join an orchestra, how many people are excited to be there? The newbies. The people that are in the orchestra for years are tired of it and they don't generalization, but most of them you are seeing as
The way I hate to say this, but like every now and then, like when I'll do a gig, I look at the people who have been doing it for a long time versus me who might be very green to something, especially if it's something at like the Kennedy Center. Because like I prayed to play at the Kennedy Center. And you know, God bless, I've done that twice now.
right.
Um, and one of the gigs I did was a collaboration with musicians of the Kuwait National Orchestra.
Hmm.
And I kind of take my time taking selfies with everybody, chatting with everybody. And I noticed that half of the string players have already left.
Yeah.
And, maybe they have other places to go. Maybe they're tired. Fine. But, like, I mean, we have, we are privileged to be able to do what we do for a living. You know, playing on good instruments, having the right tools, having people underestimate how important it is to have a good wardrobe as a musician. Like, that also costs money. Like all these different things, the infrastructure to be able to even maybe get to the Kennedy Center from a, logistics standpoint. Like these are all things that are like, important to think about. And it's like, honor that. I always like to think of what Sarah Chang says, where she's like, um, the pressure I put on myself is to give a better concert today than I did yesterday, and tomorrow always has to be better than today. And I think that is just generally a piece of advice you can lead with in your daily life. Being a better person today than you were yesterday, and tomorrow you still need to be a better person. And I think as a musician too, like how you carry yourself is so important. It's not just a gig. It's a celebration of art and music making.
Yeah. I have run into very similar things and I'm gonna try to remain nameless and I might have to cut myself if yeah, if we drop any names accidentally because I suck at censoring myself. Um, but to remain professional, I've seen some pretty renowned people walk out of concerts that they performed in where there's gatherings and completely ignore everyone waiting to congratulate them.
Yeah.
Which baffles my mind that they're still seen as a personable person. I've talked with professionals in North America versus European professionals, and the North American professionals say things um, along the lines of, "We walk out on stage and say, F the audience, I'm performing for myself," versus the European standard of, "Everything I do is for the audience and for music." And I think that that sums up everything in its entirety. And it's just such a frustrating and baffling thing that um, musicians that don't necessarily want to be a part of that trend in North America have to kind of buy into that to succeed, it seems like, right?
Yeah. I can think of so many examples on this, honestly, because like when I saw Berlin Philharmonic many years ago, I actually traveled to Florida to see them on their last tour stop,
Hmm.
and they had a reception for the audience and the musicians.
Yeah.
I got a picture with Kirill Petrenko, and when I posted that picture, a lot of people were like, "How on earth did you get that picture and not have a bodyguard come after you for it?" Because he was just there, and he was so happy that, I went up and talked to him. Or like even with like Amichai Gross and Matthew Hunter. Like I had emailed Matthew, that's why I knew to meet him there. And it was just very, very interesting to like see like I was literally chatting with some of the best musicians in the world because that infrastructure was placed there by the organization, by probably the orchestra and the people that were hosting them.
Hmm.
Like, it's a thing. I also think about, for example, like, I did this for my DMA thesis was recital curation. And I think about it as like why do people look at recitals as just a requirement to check off? It should be you testing out your skills as an artist to put together a program with the help of your teacher.
Hmm.
And to make a big deal about it, be insufferable. You are performing and you want to share that music with the people that are coming and supporting you.
Yeah.
Like I can never understand why like I've had colleagues like I worked on like, one of my favorite pieces with a pianist at school and he didn't tell anybody that he was performing it. I'm like, "Are you kidding me? I'm playing this is the second time I'm playing this viola sonata for an empty room. Like why? Like why didn't you call your friends?" Um or similarly when I go on Broadway, especially. Broadway I always notice this. Like the orchestra members come out before the actors, but nobody cheers on the orchestra members. Or like even when people do, the orchestra members are like, "Meh." I'm like, "No, you're playing all the beautiful music that like makes the star sound good."
Hmm.
There's a really good interview that a friend of mine made. His name is Raji Asan, and it was like an old YouTube series that he did. I don't know what's going on upstairs. It was an old YouTube series that he did, and it was called Making Brews and Paying Dues, and he was interviewing an actress named Julia Murney. And she was saying, unless you're standing under a fluorescent light singing a cappella, you're never doing a solo. Because if you have a pianist, it's a duet. If you have someone running lights on you, it's a trio. If there's a camera person, it's a quartet. And like nothing happens without the sum of its parts to get you to have that big moment on stage.
Hmm.
And I think, that was a thing that she was telling actors to keep in mind. But I think when you are also a pit player, you are kind of coming together to create something special, and you should own it. People are coming to see you be part of that storytelling. People are coming, you are doing it for a ticketed audience at the end of the day, in some cases. Like, it is your responsibility to make that audience feel like they're part of what's happening, that magic on stage.
Hmm.
And, I think it's very easy to lose sight of that. And of course, I mean, I've played days where like I was like fasting in Ramadan and I was exhausted. Still made it a point to like, talk to people
Smile.
because it's important.
Yeah,
It's important.
exactly. It's an
And,
attitude thing, right?
you kind of have to put on, I mean, we are actors at the end of the day in some cases, like it is important to And at the end of the day, even if you pretend for a minute that, you're still happy when you don't feel the best, it
Hmm.
may even change your mood because hearing an audience member tell you how much your performance meant to them,
Hmm.
that's always going to put a smile on your face. And just to know that what you did for that audience member is also, it's a gift.
Yeah.
It is a
It's a,
gift.
it's a privilege. Yeah. I think that's a really important thing that we cannot say more. We can't say enough. Like this needs
Hmm.
to be more of a thing we are taught as a in our private lessons. I remember some of my most formative ones are when my mentor is talking to me about how to present, right? It's not necessarily faking it if you're just being more outward with your emotions. Because I try not to be very red. Like my face is pretty RBF, intentionally because I don't want people to read what I'm thinking.
Yeah.
But um that's something that you have to think about when you walk out on stage. If you walk there like you hate the world, people are going to not feel as comfortable. If you walk out and have a little bit of a quirky charm, at the very least, you start out with a little wave, or you
Yeah.
greet the audience, and those things are really important as musicians. And I think a big reason we forfeit those in North America, from what I've seen, this would just be a generalization, and maybe Europeans do it too. But walking out on stage and not looking at the audience, walking out on stage and for the whole entire duration of a concert or recital, not saying a word, um, or talking about the pieces, or not having a organized event afterwards with the conductor or the music director, anything like that. I have to give props to Delaware Symphony. When every single concert I worked for them on throughout the year, every single one had a meeting with the musical director and
Yeah.
chairs of the orchestra and things like that.
Yeah.
I think that's so important because you're allowing the personality of the people behind the scenes and the people in the orchestra to show their personalities outside of the notes they play, right? Maybe we'll segue into some stigmas and structural barriers.
Yeah. I feel like this is like a whole thesis right here.
This sure is. It's kind of like a hodgepodge of Rizwan Jacob ideology, I feel like.
Oh yeah.
Um, this could be a second dissertation of itself.
Oh my gosh.
What do you think? Maybe not even just like classical music as a system. Um,
Mhm.
yeah, maybe classical music as a system. Classical music as an idea, music even as an idea. What do you think that musicians or creative people aren't saying loud enough? So we could talk about elitism, racism, um, Eurocentrism, and not breaking the standard canon. Anything really. We could talk about any of these frustrations we have in the world that we're just breezing over.
Yeah, I think, well, you mentioned one is breaking the standard canon and sort of fe perpetuating this annoying stereotype that we as violists don't have enough literature to perform when we on orchestra auditions are only limited to are limited specifically through to three different concerto,
Hmm.
all of which were written within a decade of each other.
Yeah.
And it's like, how on earth is that the defining factor for what it means to showcase our playing? You know me, I hate the Bartok concerto. Like, I'll listen to it begrudgingly in some cases, but I don't I studied it for 4 years. It is not my piece.
Yeah.
Um, I have a love-hate relationship with Hindemith, and Walton is hard to execute as a solo.
Yeah.
So in that case, it's like, we're not doing ourselves any favors by not opening our eyes and our ears to other repertoire. And then also, we do have to address this issue that it is harder to get into an orchestra than it is to get into medical school. It's like a less than 1% acceptance rate.
Say it louder, Rizwan.
It's harder to get into an orchestra than it is to get into medical school.
Yeah.
So that leads to, why I did my thesis. And like, a thing that I've been realizing, it's like, why aren't music schools keeping that in mind? Like, yes, it is important to take that required excerpts class, 100%,
Hmm.
because you need to learn that material because of what it teaches you. Maybe you don't audition for an orchestra, but you need to learn the work ethic.
Yes.
And you need to understand what these pieces are.
And just what it takes to
And
begin.
exactly, because that's also how you decide, is that even something you want to do?
Mm-hmm.
So if you have that work ethic in you and you can go about auditioning for orchestras and you have the financial means of being able to do so, go for it. But otherwise, keep that in mind. Like, there's so much to think about. Music is constantly changing. There's different facets of music. It should not be an elective class like entrepreneurship should not be an elective class.
Mm-hmm.
Music business should not be an elective class. Those should be required classes,
Yes.
irrespective, because what a lot of people will not tell you that even as a performer, you are your own CEO unless you're getting an agent who's going to do the work for you, which also requires money
Mm-hmm.
because sometimes agencies will take cuts of your paycheck.
Mm-hmm.
So if you need the full paycheck and you don't want to pay an agency, all these other things to think about. Um, and we just have, and the my other big gripe is tuxedos need to stop being the standard.
I
Tux
would agree with you there.
Stop being the standard. It looks good. I know I look very fierce in a tuxedo, but I hate playing in one. And because it's not performance wear. It's formal wear. And then there's also this other narrative that, people who wear tuxedos are people that work in service. You go to a fancy hotel or a fancy restaurant, wait staff are usually wearing tuxedos.
Mm-hmm.
So that means we're still in this day and age equating musicians to work staff on concert stages, mind you.
Yeah.
And it's almost like, because it's weird, like, you see women having every guideline possible that they like can fit concert black into. Men tuxedos. I personally don't like wearing jackets. Like, I mean, I think I'm more in a jacket era now just because when I do solo, I can wear a jacket as opposed to like, sitting and playing.
Mm-hmm.
But it's like, let people also see that you can be expressive and be formal. I wear my South Asian formal black whenever I can because it looks beautiful. And for me, it's more ergonomic to play in. And you're sitting through a Beethoven symphony or Shostakovich symphony.
Yeah.
For me, it feels like wearing a t-shirt, but I have like layers on it. I have like a vest and, it's expressive. I'm not telling everyone to go out and wear South Asian formal because that's a symptom of a larger issue. But I think there should be a way to like have a little bit of expression. Actually, Richmond Symphony, they hired a designer to curate concert attire for men and women in the orchestra. And it's basically all black with some sort of splash of blue. And anyone in the orchestra can wear some version of one of those outfits.
That's pretty
It's
cool.
looks so good. My partner and I went and saw them when James Ennis came to play in Brahms Concerto, and I
Uh-huh.
noticed and I was like, wait a minute. And I had remembered reading about this too. And it's like, why don't people do stuff like this? Like, let's make classical music more exciting for even people who don't have social media accounts, because obviously people that are running social media accounts know what they're doing. But like Pittsburgh Symphony has a good social media account. Minnesota Orchestra has a good social media account. But like, the average symphony goer doesn't. So
Yeah.
it's like, and maybe some people choose not to be on social media, which I would not be on social media if it wasn't for my work.
Yep.
But like, it's 2025. We're halfway through the year. We're still having issues with dress code and, little things that really are not big. I think we make a big deal out of certain things than we should.
Yeah.
So I think in that retrospect, we need to be a little bit more open to, you know, maybe moving with the time a little bit, letting people kind of be a bit more expressive while also being on stage because, unless someone's coming in like tank top and shorts, like let them decide what their wardrobe can be. and things like that. I think the last thing that I was thinking of was you mentioned racism, and I definitely contribute. I definitely think that was a contributing factor to why I had issues with that orchestra in October.
Hmm.
Um, but I also think that, it's like if you see organizations taking stances on things, it's like it should be like unapologetically taking a stance on something. Like without trying to sound political, like if you're part of an organization that is doing like land acknowledgements at the beginning of concerts, but you're not, putting out a statement towards an event that is happening in our current time that surrounds a similar consciousness, then are you actually for the cause?
Yeah. Or is
Or
it out of obligation?
exactly, is it out of obligation or is it actually out of good intentions to raise awareness to an issue? And then, of course, when you find out like maybe political heads that are contributing to your pocketbook, it raises a lot of issues. But then you have to decide from an ethics standpoint, where do you stand on those issues? And
Right.
what do you want to do as an orchestra and as an organization when it comes to these things? Because you you can have your cake, but you may not be able to eat it entirely.
Yeah.
So, but I think it's better to be an organization of good character
Hmm.
than to be one of like, performative morals. And I think that similarly goes with, concert programming. Like, are you programming certain pieces and then your roster kind of completely throws that for a loop? Um, like I would hope that, you are highlighting, maybe if you're highlighting a South Asian composer, are you having South Asian performers be part of your group? Or, it's a lot of different things to consider. Well, yes, it shouldn't necessarily mean that you're having South Asian performers for the sake of, having them, but it's like
Hmm.
make sure you have really good South Asian performers that are in your group being, showcased or something of that sort. Because I think it all has to kind of connect. Um, being a person of color, being queer, being, a child of immigrants here in the US, I wear a lot of different hats at times.
Hmm.
And I am very conscious of that. And I am very conscious of that even when I'm concert programming and when I'm talking about programs and I'm trying to find connections to everything. I may not always be the right person to do a specific performance, and I completely acknowledge that. But I also want to be part of that initiative that makes it a point that the right people are doing what they need to do with maybe a piece of music, maybe with how they approach a situation. And when people talk about the arts being a place of shelter from the crazy world, then those arts organizations need to stand for that all the time.
Right.
And like, I mean, even Broadway is another example because like people talk about Broadway being like this place of inclusivity. However, if you have one differing view from the collective, people go out on a witch hunt for you. Or like they'll cancel you for one thing, but they'll like let this particular thing slide.
Right.
And it's very, very alarming because, when you are not in a demographic that's the majority, you are going to hold a lot of different views. Unfortunately, a lot of those views might make you very unpopular,
Hmm.
but you still got to work. You still got to do what you do. You still want to do what you love. And that might be the only way you can do it. So it's like, where do you find that balance? And, I hope in the future I hope the wake up call doesn't take a long time because there's enough information knocking at our doors to be like, wake up now when we should have been woken up like 2 years ago, for example.
Hmm.
So that's my soapbox on that. I feel like I may have rattled on a little bit,
No.
but
Yeah.
I think we also just need to generally do what we say and not just talk about it only. Like it's good to get words out there to, get ideas going. But putting plans into action, I think, is even more important. Actually, it is the most important thing.
Yes. I mean,
So,
we again, I don't care if we get political, but I'll get political. We heard Obama's discussion that he had at a press conference the other day where he told the Democrats to toughen up
Yeah.
and to stop whining and actually do something. And I think um, that carries its weight in a lot of different forms. And I think what you were trying to get towards, you had a lot of different topics, because there's a lot of different topics to be frustrated about in our sphere, I would
Yeah.
say. Um, I think maybe you'll disagree, but would you say that it all boils down to hypocrisy and not taking action?
Oh, 100%.
So maybe,
100%. I mean, my biggest litmus test currently for that is the New York mayoral election. Because if we can talk about that off record, but like that's one litmus test. And then also just the general consciousness about how the world has reacted to what's happening in Palestine.
mhm,
Like it's it's not that deep. Yes, nuance is important when discussing certain things. But again, like you can't say one thing and then completely greenlight something bad to happen when your original stance is against that exact thing.
right.
And in our field, when people talk about like going back to like viola and repertoire, when people want to talk about there's so much music for the viola and you still limit it to three concertos, which at the end of the day, an orchestra is not testing you on how well you play those concertos.
Yeah.
And as a matter of fact, playing those excerpts out of context as a soloist is not going to determine how well you lead that viola section.
Nope.
Because I have played with violists who are phenomenal players, but garbage leaders. So, and also that old guard that seems to think that this is still a system that works well needs to have their ears perked up and being like, no, we need to find another solution
Yeah. Hmm.
because it shouldn't be that it takes one orchestra 7 years to find a principal viola player for their section when their associate principal has been acting principal for 7 years and has taken the audition twice and has been rejected from the position. Like, if that's not like garbage politics slash poor approaches to what the process is now, I don't know what it is. I think we don't do enough. I don't think we don't do enough to make ourselves potentially a better environment collectively. And like what you said regarding like Obama's speech, it's like he's not wrong. It's wasted energy in certain places. Like, and then you look at all the different layers to it.
Yeah.
Um, yeah, but yeah, that's how I feel about this. And it's like, it's one of the reasons why I find myself in this dance between different worlds that I do. Not to say that I don't have issues with the event entertainment industry when like I see how much people spend on weddings and they're like, you're still trying to bargain on the string player.
Hmm.
Um, but like, then I have people who are like, yep, what's the amount? We'll sign the check. So it's like, it's if it's not one thing, it's another. I think it's just a matter of like, people's budgets and what people want to spend with their money. I can't exactly control that. Or like, that's not exactly a controllable thing from most points. People know what they want. A more definitive system for making people succeed or helping people succeed, but choosing not to do it, that's a problem.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Maybe maybe one quick thing that I want to tackle with this too is talking about things. You kind of said there's a witch hunt for certain
Yeah.
things, right? How would you, how do you live authentically without losing your stature? Since you still do have to work, you still have to do your performing and networking and everything, but you need to also live morally and ethically sound to your beliefs. How, for people listening, or just so you can have this like put into words, how do you navigate that?
There is an advantage of moving in silence because the thing is, if you scream from the rooftops all the time, And again, this is something I've had to learn.
Hmm.
Like there is a benefit of screaming from the rooftops your view or who you are or how you feel about something. I think that's more for you. It's not for the people around you. There's an advantage of moving in silence when it comes to certain things. I had a colleague at Carnegie Mellon. She was like, "I'm sitting back taking notes, not making herself known that she's privy to the situation." And there's something important to that. And then also, as somebody who does a lot of activism, when it comes to making people aware of something, a social cause, or like maybe an ethics issue with an organization, you cannot scream about it to people's faces. Sometimes it requires this kind of work,
Yeah.
small incremental amounts of work that build up into something, whether it's educating people on something, whether it's having an important conversation, sometimes a difficult conversation. That's where you stay authentic and how you navigate those things.
Hmm.
Because if you are true to your cause, you will be able to stick to that sort of ethos all the time. However, I come as I am. I come, there's a job description. I will satisfy that description and I'll go. I'll still go as Rizwan because this face is going to stay the same. Whatever I wear is going to be whatever I wear. But for people to know who Rizwan is, I feel like first of all, that's their privilege that I can easily take away. And then two, I do choose to move in silence in some cases because also not everybody is worth me talking to about something.
Yeah.
And, people who know me well know what I care about and they'll talk to me about it and we'll have conversations. And sometimes I don't need to have a conversation with some people. And that's not me compromising my authenticity. That is me having control over the situation.
Hmm. Yeah, I think that's an important thing because I've come into a lot of different scenarios where in classes with like business and entrepreneurship where the topic has come up, what if there is a misalignment in morals for some opportunity that you've gotten, and how do you navigate that? And a lot of people say they would just not work for that organization. But then I bring up the question of, so how does progress or change ever happen if there's so much of a separation between two parties that they can't work together on art? Can't art be an avenue for understanding mutually, to maybe bridge some education? And that sort of nuance that you were just talking about, I think
Exactly.
is
You kind of have to sometimes put yourself in that situation. And then, for example, if you're worried about it from an income standpoint, you can take a portion of the money you make from that organization and donate it to a charity that
Mhm.
maybe doesn't align with their views. I have a lot of friends that do that, and I think it's actually kind of like a boss
Yeah.
move. So, I think it comes down to you at the end of the day and what your mission is. I at times, in certain cases, I'm very unapologetic about my views when it comes to certain things like International Pride Orchestra. If you go look at my pictures from that, you will know what I mean. But that obviously is a space where that was necessary.
Hmm.
I can't say that about like, a traditional orchestra concert or, your everyday situation.
Yeah. Or
I
as
am,
a teacher.
as a teacher,
Hmm.
I the last thing I want to do is go into a teacher when I go to a teacher when I'm spending, upwards of $100 more sometimes, wanting to learn about a piece, and then they ask me something that is politically charged, knowing fully that I'm going to probably have a different view from them. And maybe it's them trying to elicit a reaction. I don't know. But it's not the time and place for it.
Yeah.
It's like, take me out for coffee if you want to learn a little bit about my perspective or something like that. And, let's have a level-headed conversation. A viola lesson's not the place for that. Um, and, working in music is not always the place for that too. Working in music may be the connection that leads to something great in terms of a conversation or a greater social change. But that kind of have to work together and separately at the same time.
Mhm. Yeah. Okay, this is something I've been doing with the previous two. installments, but I'm
Sure.
curious what yours is because you are uh much more experienced than these other two. They're younger, and I think still developing their identity too. Not just because they're both wonderful people, but I'm very curious because you have a lot of experience in talking. You're
Oh,
very good with words.
yeah.
So this is what I call, or I'm gonna call, a moment of resonance, pun
Okay.
intended. And so this is kind of like a time capsule type of thing.
Sure.
Um, it could literally be a quote. It could be something that a mentor or a teacher has said to you. It could be something that is boiling in your gut, or
Yeah.
something that's an identity point. But this is something you can kind of look back on in a year and be like, oh yeah, this is what I was going through, or this is something that you can use to inform the audience of who you are and
Yeah.
something that's core to your identity, something along those lines.
Okay. Always bring yourself and what you can offer as an individual to whatever you're doing. Whether it's music, whether it's medicine, whether it's whatever task at hand it is. There are many people who are doing the exact same thing you are doing, but how do you put your exact stamp on what it is? And that could be innovation, that could be a work ethic, that could be an idea, that could even be who you are as a person and what you bring to that field. Um, and I can firmly attest to this because I said this exact same thing about 6 years ago to an audience of people. So that is something I will always live by. It's
Nice.
always finding how you can bring yourself to a situation and what contributions you can bring as your own individual self.
Yeah, I like that. I think that really sums up your, honestly, all of a lot of our discussions.
Yeah.
Core identity things. I'm very curious as one last talking point.
Hmm.
Um, with your niche of South Asian music and having participated and done arrangements in Broadway musical type events, um, and I think you know full well that you're pushing against the idea of what's allowed in classical music.
Yeah.
Um, let's take it in this direction because
Sure.
this is an interesting thing. Um, do you think that do you think that you're ever torn between this idea of authenticity and acceptability in this journey to get to whatever this success is in our field? Do you feel like you ever have to forfeit authenticity or being mm, accepted in the community to get to success?
No. I used to think that was a thing.
Hmm.
But I think it just boils down to being in control of the situation. Like I think it's a matter of looking at each situation individually. And
Hmm.
again, luckily, because we do perform in the arts, we kind of have a little bit more leeway when it comes to our own personal expression.
Hmm.
I will say South Asian culture is a lot more conservative. And in some cases, people might be okay with other people doing something, but they may not necessarily be okay with you as an individual because of who you are in their lives.
Hmm.
So that's something to consider. Um, at the end of the day, I always try to be as professional as I can wherever I'm working, and balancing it with my authenticity is important. Um, and at the end of the day, like I know as who I am as a person and what I do and how I do it, that'll always work in my advantage. Um, I just try to be very conscious about how I go about it. If I'm playing a wedding at a conservative Muslim wedding, like playing a conservative Muslim wedding, if I'm playing there, um, I'll be a little bit more different with how I conduct myself. I mean, you'll still get Rizwan as his full authentic self, just a different version of it. And again, that's just me being in control of my situation and what I need to do for my job and to hopefully get another job out of that same opportunity.
Yeah, I think that's an important thing. I'll go into it too. I work at churches and I'm not religious, and that it's not that I'm lying. I think I used to think that I was lying to myself or to other people, but you can be your core identity, especially as a musician. We're privileged to be a musician,
Hmm.
right? And that can be authentic without having to feel like a fraud within this community. And I think that's something that a lot of people do struggle with as um, these soldiers of, we're in an orchestra. What's your identity if you're in an orchestra? A section member? That
It
type
doesn't
of thing. So a
matter.
lot of people struggle with that ego balance or being true to themselves. And then when that comes into the conversation of success and identity, you know, a lot of people go into spirals about that, myself included. I've lost myself many a times with that.
It's a very difficult situation to be in sometimes. And, it's a struggle that is not often talked about, especially because of how people view playing in a collective versus playing as an individual. Um, I think when you're playing as an individual, it is important to be true to yourself. When you're playing in the collective, it's an understanding that yourself is fitting within the collective.
Hmm.
And, at that point, there's also something pretty beautiful about it. At that point, it's only your music that is your identity. So you don't have to worry about whatever baggage or whatever you might be dealing with coming with you into the music at that moment
Yeah.
as part of your identity. At that point, you're just an orchestral musician. When you're a soloist, for example, if you had a bad day, that bad day could very become part of your wedding solo. Who knows?
Yeah.
Or like what energy you bring.
Hmm.
So I just think it's very interesting to navigate it from that standpoint. I think we also, I think I talk about this a lot in like Western queer culture, but I think we put way too much emphasis on like people needing to take us at full value all the time. And it's like if people don't, then they're not the right people. And at the
Yeah.
same time, it's like, why do we need to be full value all the time? That's also a performance, and sometimes it's one that gets tiring. You know, we can share who we are with different people in different circumstances and different amounts of us. There's nothing wrong with that. Um, I think we kind of put this emphasis on like what identity is in that regard and
Hmm.
this sort of obsession with it. At the end of the day, you might be coming, as yourself, Jacob Burke, the violist who has all these different layers to himself. You're coming to a church to play viola. To other people, you're just a violist at the church. And maybe someone will come up and talk to you and want to get to know you. And that's when you can share yourself with that person.
Yep.
I think a lot of it happens before and after the music making, but how you present yourself in that moment, you might just be another musician.
Hmm.
Now, if you chose to wear something very, very unique and, out there from your standard church musician, that is something that people are going to see and it may inform their opinion, but it may also be a very cool conversation topic.
Yeah. Uh,
So,
I remember when I wore a mask to this specific church and I was not so kindly greeted. So, yeah, small things like that do matter a lot, but
yeah,
I think you have to find that nice center balance of not what is it you said earlier? That nuance. You don't have to go full force with anything. You can
yeah.
just it's not so serious.
It's,
Just do the
it's,
music.
yeah, it's literally like, putting on a different hat.
Yeah.
You're still
And
the same person, you're just wearing a different hat.
it's not necessarily acting either, right?
It's not.
At that point, performing I think can be an
Hmm.
act, but maybe not this thing is faking it necessarily.
Absolutely. I used to think it was like a fake it till you make it energy
Hmm.
at one point, but it's not.
Yeah.
It
It's a
is
hard
a lot of
battle.
understanding. Yeah.
Takes a lot of time, right? Yeah.
And you need to allow yourself that time. You're on your own schedule at the end of the day.
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
Hopefully to the younger people that'll help. And to the people that are on the journey still, that'll
Yeah.
help. Do you have anything you want to shout out? Any social media, any projects you've been putting together, other things they should look
I'm
into?
in the middle of rebranding, so it's a little chaotic, but like, I mean, I'm on Instagram at Dr. Rizwan Viola. I just started a new YouTube channel under the same name because my old YouTube channel was my personal account.
Hmm.
And yeah, that grew to 1,000 subscribers. Great. But like people would be getting personal emails from me as like Dr. Rizwan Viola. And they're like, what? So I kind of just needed to find a better way to sort of segment that off.
I see.
But I'm in the middle of rebranding and just trying to start a new issue initiative. And if you have people in the DC area that want to take viola lessons or violin lessons, I know a good teacher.
There you go.
Yeah. So
Nice.
there's that.
So, can you name out your website and your how to find you, how to reach out to you if they want to take lessons?
Yeah, so my website is Rizwan Jagani Violist. Still, it's that. I'm still keeping the remnant of that, at least until I choose to rebrand that website. But if they just Google Dr. Rizwan Viola, like that Instagram will pop up. They can reach me through there because it'll take you to my email. And actually, my email is also Dr. dot Rizwan Viola at gmail.com if they want to reach out to me for lessons
There you
or
go.
performance opportunities too.
Yeah. Uh, I know a guy. Yeah. There you go. Well, to follow his journey, be sure to follow that. I'll put it in the description, like a real influencer. We're trying. Um, be sure to check out all of the performances on his personal, unless he uploads them on to the new YouTube.
They'll be on the new one. Yeah.
Okay, well then go follow the new YouTube. Then you'll grow it to 1,000 subscribers and a lot of watch hours.
Yeah.
But until next time, thank you for listening. And thank you for joining me, Rizwan.
Great to be here. My pleasure.